week is Construction Safety Week. For those who may be not so familiar with the construction industry, Safety Week is super important for the industry, where we focus on safety, how we can be better about coming home in the manner that we came to the site in, take care of our mental health, and all things relating to health and wellness in construction. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to our guests to give a very brief intro to them and their backgrounds and some of the cool stuff that they're working on. So I'll first start with Prakash. Why don't you take it away?
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So I'm Prakash Singhani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Novatech. I'm a civil engineer by background. I've spent my entire career in the construction industry, working across the world and on some amazing projects. So I started off in the UK. I've done stints in India, Indonesia, and the last 11 years or so I've spent here in the Middle East. So I'm based out of Dubai, but work across the Middle East. And at Novatech, we're building technology that's focused on helping break down the barriers of communication within health and safety in the construction space. And we're doing that using conversational AI. So we're looking at how these advanced tools can, be accessed by as many people as possible, but also that when they do access them, they can understand what we're asking them to access, and the information is easily digestible.
All right. Thanks for sharing, Prakash. And then moving on to Carl, tell us a little bit about your background as well.
Well, first of all, I'm a bit, I don't know how I'm going to top Prakash's intro there right enough, given his breadth and depth of experience. So, Carl Simons, I'm one of the co-founders and chief futurist at the artificial and technology company FYLD. I have a number of hats that I wear. One is advisor to the Cabinet Office and Department for Science, Innovation and Technology of the UK government. I'm also a lecturer at Cambridge University, and I'm a non-executive director on the board of Water and Sanitation for the Urban Poor, which is a global organisation providing consultancy services and solutions around the world for some of our poorest cities in society. I'm a mechanical electrical engineer by trade, similar to Prakash, just the above ground element, let's say, whilst he looks after the civils. I'm also a chartered health and safety professional, having studied at the University of West of Scotland for that. In terms of experience, similar to Prakash, both domestically and international, working across the world in oil and gas, highways, construction, railroads, electricity, gas, water. So a diverse range of different industry sectors, all with the underpinning approach around prevention of harm in both a construction director position and a health and safety professional position. So that's my background.
All right, incredible. So I think we have such a good mix of experiences here. So thank you guys again for agreeing to share some of your thoughts with us today. So I want to first talk about, when we talk about safety, and Prakash, we had briefly touched on this, but let's expand it a little bit more. So what is safety? Because there's safety 1.0, there's safety 2.0 out there. What are these concepts? What does that mean?
So I think all of these things are labels that people put on theories or ethoses or practices. But essentially, I think there's an evolution within the safety space, within the kind of profession of safety, where maybe historically safety was treated more like a compliance thing and trying to admonish people for the things that didn't go right. So looking at accidents and looking at incidents and trying to understand why things went wrong. And the evolution of this, which is some people brand as safety 2.0, and I think if you start branding things, you start basically creating division, and so I'm a little bit kind of sensitive about it. But essentially, what this evolution of safety practice is trying to do is look at the vast majority of the time that things go right, and then encourage people to do more of the right thing. Then by kind of doing that, you end up doing less bad things, or less bad things happen. And it's a subtle difference. So essentially, if I really simplify it, is instead of concentrating on the things that go bad and stopping them from happening, concentrate on the things that went well and do more of those.
All right. Let's see. So why does it matter though? Does it matter to have like the differences and the, the labels?
Well, labels no, but I think it does matter, right, from a psychology perspective, I guess a statistical perspective. If we look at it statistically,
Hmm.
if you're doing more things right more of the time, there's less space or time to do things wrong, right? And also by doing that, you're understanding why people are doing things the way that they're doing it, rather than trying to work out why people won't do it the way that you want them to do it. And again, these are really subtle nuances, but in understanding why people are doing it the way that they are, then you can understand, you actually might learn that there's a better way of doing something, a safer way of doing something. And the other way of kind of thinking about this is that by looking at the way that people are tending to do it, you can also maybe look at the process that you're expecting people to do and change that instead. So instead of people and stopping them from doing the way that they want to do it, change the way it should be done. So it talks about work planned versus work delivered. That's a kind of common phrase in this new
Yep.
or evolving way of working. So making sure that those two things are aligned. So with the way that something's planned, if people are not doing it the way that it's planned over and over again, maybe change the plan rather than change the people or change people's mindsets. And I think all of these
Huh.
things there's a lot of research happening to show that doing it that way helps to change culture, to embed this type of philosophy into people, and rather than just looking at it as numbers on a spreadsheet and then always looking backwards to try and see how you can stop it happening going forwards.
Fascinating. So if I'm getting it right, maybe not necessarily forcing a change on people, but rather changing your process or your plan to fit what they're going to do anyway is
Yeah.
a better bet, or a safer bet rather.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and also learning from these people, right? Most of the people in construction that are there, and considering that we've got really a maturing age force,
Hmm.
a workforce, is they know what they're doing, right? I don't think anybody comes to work, like you said, wanting to go home with a limb missing or
Mm.
any other type of injury, and so learning from them about the way that they work, that they do things, rather than a kind of forcing a way of working upon them, which we think is safer, I think is really important, right? And I think it's about listening and understanding these nuances.
Right, right. 100%. So, I'm going to move on to kind of another general topic here. So, I mentioned it briefly in the opening, but it's Construction Safety Week, but we don't call it Health and Safety Week. It's just Safety Week. But we might be missing some things on the table by not including the health part, and mental health is a huge component as well. So, um, what are your thoughts on that health part of safety?
To me or Carl?
Either one, whoever wants to take it first.
So I'll go first if you don't mind, Carl. So
Yeah.
I think health part of health and safety is often underappreciated. Like people jokingly say it's a lowercase h and a capital S, right? When you look at H&S, when it's kind of abbreviated,
Mm,
and I think that they should get equal billing. And I think the two are symbiotic. So if you can imagine, and it's not easy to it's easy to imagine that people who are not in the best of mental health states are more likely to have accidents, right? They're maybe less likely to be concentrating on what they're doing. They might be distracted. Their mood might affect some of the decisions that they make and things like that. And so I think the two things go hand in hand. I think the other part is we're coming to an appreciation that we're in an industry where we've got a high rate of suicides, right? From the work,
unfortunately, yeah,
yeah,
the
which
statistics
is
are very scary.
shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that's another thing that historically we haven't dealt with, right? We've kind of buried our heads in the sand, and so when
Mm,
we get the opportunity to think about and talk about health and safety, I think it should be given equal billing, and wellness and well-being again are all intrinsic parts of this. I know Carl's done a lot of work in this area as well.
yeah. Carl,
Yeah.
let's hear some thoughts from you too.
Thanks, Erin. And I fully support what Prakash has just said. you mentioned there the two are symbiotic, and you cannot differentiate between the two. Most of us in business, I've led major corporates for circa 30 years, and I mean, the intrinsic link between injury and illness and incidents that have an outcome in both areas, you cannot separate it. I remember beginning my time at Thames Water and speaking to the then CEO and executive team about, the importance of understanding the psychological health factors within organizations, and, how we needed to evolve our health performance within the business through setting out health performance indicators that would go alongside the safety performance indicators. So if you imagine where many organizations play is in human-led indicators, it goes back to your earlier question as well. For many years we've had lead and lag indicators, a lot of which are human-led, right? So we're looking at injury in different categories, whether fatality, major fractures, lost time injuries, first aid injuries, and then these are all loss and incidents sit underpinning that, where you would have a substantial amount of incidents that could lead to those injuries or illness occurring, yeah? And then when we looked at leading indicators, again, we're back into human-led indicators. How many inspections have been done? How many senior management visits? How many training days face-to-face? How many safety observations where somebody's intervened? These are good indicators that have served us well for many, many years. But I think as we explore and we look, maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but now I'm talking more to organizations about digital safety performance indicators and digital health performance indicators, and how are we looking at what the data is telling us to impact that area. So I think the health side, whether physical or psychological, organizations still aren't doing enough in this space, in my opinion. During my tenure at Thames, which is the largest water and sewage company in the UK, leading that for 10 years, in the first 5 years of being there, we dropped work-induced illness by 78%, largely as a result of putting in place sensible measures, making sure 2/3 of the business was delivered by supply chain partners. So they understood our expectations as an organization as well. So alongside the safety parameters and the safety indicators, we also put in place the health management and embraced the organization with that, whether it was design for health, procurement in health, into operational delivery and maintenance as an outcome. So you can really have a massive impact, both physical illness and on psychological illness within an organization very quickly, actually, if you do the right things.
Right. And Carl, you said 78% improvement. Is that correct? Wow.
Yeah, I was blessed with a really great team. And the thing is, and I presented to hundreds of organizations on a case study around mental health within business, from politicians to leaders to managers and field workers. But it was always about how does an organization set out its strategic approach. But I always like the fact of, in our annual tactical engagement plan, what we had was everything that had gone before and everything that we were going to do. Because the thing that got me from organizations, I would enter different companies and say, okay, what do you have in place? And nobody would ever turn around and say, that's everything we do around here that supports your health and safety within the business. We have onboarding, but then it's lost, yeah? So organizations put in initiatives, and I always like the fact that we capture them all, what worked well, put it on our strategy, contained everything that was in place and everything we were going to do in the following year.
So for those who are listening in, and I'm so curious myself, if you had to pick 2 top things that you would recommend that are very practical in practice that, an organization can pick up and run with and start to get maybe not 78% overnight, but start working towards getting improvements on that scale, what would those 2 things be?
Okay, so there's no one silver bullet. First thing is to reach out to individuals that have great outcomes and are actually talking about this and presenting case studies. Case studies are great, right? Whether you're looking at digital organizations like Prakash and I are in, that have great outcomes and are able to showcase and evidence that. So that's really great. The other thing is you've got to then look at, how you communicate, competency upskilling. there's waves of initiatives that need to go in around these areas to be able to have that impact and outcome. You know, not just how you engage, how you communicate, how you competency upskill, how you strategically engage with executive management, line management, operational, those responsible for individuals, putting them to work safely and with the best well intentions. So there's so many things, it's hard to answer that, Erin, but I think, you know, don't be afraid to reach out and engage with individuals who are speaking about this and can offer that level of advice and support.
Yeah, my takeaway from that was communicate, talk to people, share what works.
Yeah,
At a minimum.
Yeah, really simple thing that we kind of do at Navatech is a lot of organizations, when they start meetings, they have what's called a safety moment, right? Kind of show how safety is top of the agenda and people's commitment to it, and people have a brief discussion about it at the top of every meeting. What we do at Navatech is we have a happy moment at the end of our meetings. So everybody goes around and they tell everybody else about a happy moment. And it could be to do with work, it could be to do with their families, it could be anything. But what that really helps people to do is to think about the things that they have appreciated in the last week or so, whatever frequency that meeting is. And we found it's become habitual now in the organization. And it's a great way of learning about people. What they do outside of life, what they're up to with their families, but also on a personal level, it helps. It's almost like having like a gratitude diary or something like that. You know, every week, whenever you're going to have this meeting, that you're going to be asked this question, so you're thinking about all the positive things that have happened to you that week, and knowing that you've then got to communicate it. So I would really encourage people to do this. It's a really simple thing, but super powerful.
Yeah. 100%. I love that. Not just a safety moment, but a happy moment, and then bringing that gratitude as a reminder. Yeah, fantastic stuff. So we do have a couple comments in the chat. So from Stuart, thanks Stuart for commenting here. He also gave you a shout out, Carl, for a fantastic speech at CESO, I believe, several years ago. But he also commented, what about just saying the absence of the risk of harm, injury or illness, health or loss? I think that was in reference to an earlier statement when we were talking about injury and illness prevention or something of the sort there. So any thoughts on that? Absence of the risk of harm?
Yeah, it's no different to how we go about looking at safety as well. I mean, we're always talking about, you know, zero harm, right? So, you know, it was really interesting. We had a zero harm philosophy within, go back to Thames Water. It was a great tenure. But that philosophy of zero harm meant injury and illness as well. So Stuart's absolutely right on that. How do we make sure that we have a similar mindset and we kind of promote and engender a culture that says, you know, anybody off work as a result of occupational illness is unacceptable, as we presently and lots of organizations say anybody off work as a result of occupational injury is unacceptable. And what we then can do is start, when you set that, you can then engage with executives and leaders and say, right, so if we're saying that, what do we do for safety right now? So if there's an incident that leads to loss and injury, then we have, and somebody's unable to return to work, so it's occupational injury, then we have an investigation, we have learning as a result to prevent a recurrence, right? So we have an investigation, executive reviews happen, learning, prevent recurrence. We should do the same for illness. And we did that for all 10 years I was working at Thames, and prior to that in other organizations. And it really does start to change the way individuals feel about how the business is taken seriously, where the organizations made them go off unwell. And it could be for any reason that leads to illness, whether it's psychological stresses or anxiety, depression, we know those exist, but it may be others as well, poor line management, but also it could be budget, pressure, time, regardless of what the underlying causes are. If somebody goes off unwell, ask the question and then have a conversation around it and make sure the right preventative measures are put in place.
Yeah. And just to kind of add to that, I think there's a huge kind of war for talent at the moment. Where everyone I'm speaking to is saying that they're struggling to find people, or they're struggling to find good people, and policies like the ones that Carl is speaking about are really help with retention. When you feel like cared about by the organization that you work for, you're more likely to stay. You feel better, you feel healthier. And I think from that perspective is really, really important, because it obviously costs way less to keep a person than to employ a new one, right? So hiring costs an organization a lot of money. So as well as it being the right thing to do, it has positive impacts on organizations from a retention perspective.
So yeah. So I'm seeing the bigger picture here. There's much more ROI initially than you might think with investing in these practices.
Yeah.
So there's also a couple fans of happy moments in the chat. So thank you guys. And then also for anybody else who's tuning in, if you have a question for our panelists, this is a fantastic opportunity to pick their brains. Please ask your questions or leave some comments into the chat or the comment box, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. All right.
If they're really hard ones, then we're going to ask Carl, right? That's what we agree.
Ask Carl all the hard questions. So switching gears a little bit here, I do want to get more into the tech, right? So we're all involved with construction and technology specifically, and the buzzword of the decade or the century probably is AI, artificial intelligence. It's everywhere. We have so many solutions that are incorporating it and doing some really amazing things with it. So curious to hear your thoughts on how AI applies to health and safety, and how does it apply practically for construction? So either one, feel free to comment.
Well, we can both speak for hours on this, right? But I'm gonna, I mean, Prakash, do you want to kick off?
Sure. So our approach to a practical application of AI within health and safety focuses around conversations and conversational AI. Mm-hmm. So we are working on the premise that people are currently working with health and safety tools don't get access to the right information at the right time. And with conversational AI, we're able to do that, right? So using large language models that are trained specifically on health and safety within construction, you're able to converse with these models and get accurate, relevant and contextualized answers in the palm of your hand, right? So it's having access to the smartest health and safety professional anywhere in the universe in the palm of your hand. We're also using conversational AI to capture information from people. So we believe that one of the issues with health and safety systems and current kind of way of doing things is that people don't like filling out forms, whether they're paper-based forms or
people really don't like filling out forms
or digital versions of
paperwork,
forms. Yeah, exactly, right. And so what we're doing is using conversational AI to capture information from people in a conversational manner, in the same way that you talk to friends. And lots of us use WhatsApp and iMessenger on a daily basis, right? It's become almost the de facto way of communicating with each other. And so we're tapping into that psychology where it's an intuitive, easy, and something that you do in your personal lives. We're kind of borrowing that kind of philosophy and bringing that into safety management. And so here we're able to get the information we need, whether that's some of the things that Carl mentioned, like safety audits or inspections or observations or any of those things, which would traditionally you'd have to capture with a form. We're capturing it through the art of conversation, and then you can still run analytics on the background. The other thing that we're able to do with conversational AI is to break down the barriers with language. So we work in a really diverse industry, right? Everywhere in the world, people in construction come from all over the world. And so the industry is not homogeneous when it comes to cultures or language or any of those things. And so what we're doing is making our tech available in whichever language you want. So we've got, I think, 53 different languages that we're using our technology, allowing people to use our technology. So that's breaking down the language barrier. The other thing we're doing is breaking down the barrier with literacy. So if you can't read or write, you can send a voice note in whichever language you want, and you'll get a response back in that same language. We're looking at breaking down all of these barriers. So you can imagine when we're talking about health and safety, if you're primarily delivering or asking people to input information in English, which is probably the when you're cutting out a huge demographic, right? Which is important to managing health and safety. So that's kind of the way that we're approaching AI within health and safety in construction.
Right. It's making everything accessible in a natural way. Yeah. Amazing.
So, Erin, I'm always dead conscious, right, that when we begin talking about artificial intelligence, I was lecturing this morning at another conference, but I'm always dead conscious that whenever I ask the question of certainly health and safety professionals or operational professionals in construction, whether it's senior leadership, whether it's management, politicians, there's always circa less than 10% of the audience that understand artificial intelligence. So are you okay if I share 1 or 2 slides and it will just set the scene for everything that I'm going to say then thereon? But
absolutely.
If I just share my screen,
please take it away
quickly. So this will help for anybody that you can see that, yeah?
It's coming through for me. I can see it. Looks
good.
Okay,
right. Okay. So basically, I'm going to talk just very briefly and set the scene on the big 3: natural language processing, imagery analysis, and then reasoning engine. If we start with natural language processing, the best way to describe this is there's over 7,000 spoken languages in the world right now. And if you imagine Alexa is probably, Amazon Alexa is probably the most widely used and well-known within society. Most people have it in their homes. And Alexa right now is in 9 languages. So 7,000 spoken languages, Alexa's in 9. So it gives you an idea of the infancy around natural language processing in terms of where we are on this journey right now. Yeah. And some of the names you'll recognize are on the left-hand side there. When we think about object recognition, so this is a cup, right? Now, the machine, we can train it to understand this is a cup. And if it identifies it, it'll say, hey, that's a cup. And we can scrape the net and look at different areas for the sides of it and everything that, so we can identify it. Then if I put this phone on top of it, it's still a cup, but it's looking slightly different. So imagery analysis and object recognition largely works off probabilities. So in other words, if we take images of pedestrians, vehicles, barriers, cones, excavators, machinery, equipment from different angles, scraping the internet, then the machine works off probability over 60%. We can map it to hazards and we can push those live to field workers. So it's all about probabilities when you're looking at object recognition, yeah? And then reasoning engine. So this is really exciting, and what we do around this is imagine a field worker at the point of works is recording via a video just on their phone, and they're recording what's happening at the point of work. Now, the machine can read what's said and what's seen, versus natural language processing, object recognition, imagery analysis. It can identify those backgrounds. But also the machine may say, hey, last time we were at this GPS location, I learned that there was a low voltage electricity. So therefore, I'm going to push that live for consideration by the field worker. So reasoning is all about what has been learned before around the machine learning and actually pushing it live. So it starts to really interrogate data that's coming in. If I stop sharing there, that kind of sets the scene.
Yeah,
it helps people understand where AI is at.
Yes, I think what made it click for me as well was the example with Alexa, right? She's only in, you mentioned maybe 7 or 9 languages.
9 languages out of 7,000. So it's great that we've got large language models progressing.
Yeah.
But that ability to speak back to an individual whose literacy levels are low. There's a lot of work needing doing here. But it's evolving dead quick, don't get me wrong. But it just does, because a lot of people I speak to, they start saying, oh man, there's so much to understand. You're not alone. The important bit is to reach out to individuals who are speaking about this and showing examples of how it can be applied. Drop Prakash or I a note, and we can speak to your organization and then help you understand it, but also present, here's what's working in other sectors, here's what's working in other organizations. Because if you think about construction, we've got building construction above ground, we've got civil construction, but then we've got construction of electricity, gas, water, highways, rail. So construction is so broad and in so many different areas that,
Absolutely.
you know, it's important that everybody understands in these sectors that it can be achieved. And it is being used by frontline operatives in the tens of thousands. And I mean, across all these sectors in geographies around the world now are using
Yep.
artificial intelligence solutions such as FYLD.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for myself, I'm probably going to go back and take a peek at the recording and look at those slides in a little bit more detail. So I tremendously appreciate you sharing that, Carl. So thanks for taking the time to walk us through. Do you have a thought there, Prakash?
Yeah, so I just want to touch on the fact that both of our solutions focus on the frontline workers, and I think historically the digitalization of our industry has kind of been focused on the white collar workers, people in the office, making their lives a little bit more efficient and helping them do things more efficiently. Very few technologies have been designed from the ground up to kind of focus on the frontline workforce, right? And if we think about in the demographic of a construction project or within a construction company, the biggest demographic is the frontline workforce. If you look at how many people are employed under that category, is way more multiples than the guys that are sitting, or the guys and the girls that are sitting inside an office. And I think it's really important that we understand that focusing and making technology accessible to this frontline workforce, making it easy to use, making the user experience as seamless as possible, means that we're actually making a difference. And I think that's really something that stands out, and why Carl and I get along so well is that both of the technologies that we're looking at doing are focusing on these, let's face it, frankly, ignored demographics within our industry.
Agree entirely.
Amazing. So I do want to pick up one question that came in. And again, for the audience, please drop your questions into the chat section there. So this one is, are you utilizing AR and VR in practicing health and safety in construction? And I'll throw in a thought here first. So I have used or tried out virtual reality applications that help walk you through a safety scene and give you virtual training, and you can encounter hazards and learn what not to do, and figure out what things you have to do to pass the next level. And it's effective. I think in my experience, it is very helpful to learn that, obviously, before you go out to the site and you're faced with it in real life. My take on it is that those technologies probably need to a little bit more of a ways to go just to get commoditized. I think creating those VR scenes are typically pretty pricey or intensive, even though they are helpful, but it might need a little bit more streamlining too for the user experience to be as seamless as possible. So that's my take on the AR VR components. Carl, Prakash, do you guys have any experience with AR VR?
Yeah, so why don't I start on this one, Prakash? What's really interesting is if you go to a conference right now, it's rare I will see a VR being displayed. And I've been to quite a few over recent months now and years. Set my mind back 5-7 years, and VR was everywhere in everything. Yeah. So what's happened there? You know, so with what we've seen is the evolution of that technology being replaced. Now, that technology, don't get me wrong, my son uses VR every day to connect with his mates in the home. So, you know, it's still being used in society in the home, and there's lots of new products coming out. But in the workplace, yes, it is used for training in certain areas, but I'm not seeing it evolve as you see the new tech coming through, like artificial intelligence solutions. It's starting to dissolve into the background within business. We get Prakash's thoughts on that in a second. When it comes to the AR, augmented reality, so by this so everybody's aware, we're on about things like you put the glasses on and through it you can overlay a digital solution. For instance, the easiest way to understand it is pipes and wires under the ground. If you put the digital, you can start to see, oh, here's where our pipes are, or here's where our pipes are going to be laid, or in a built environment in the construction, you can link it to your design of what is going to be constructed, pop the glasses on, and then suddenly you can be inside and you can see where the structure is going to sit. but again, not used as much as the hype that was 5+ years ago. Prakash, I don't know whether you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly the same thing. So I was part of teams that were developing these virtual experiences from safety for about 8 years ago, maybe, I think, when I was for a large consultancy, construction consulting company, and it never took off. Like at the time, we were in this hype, like Carl mentioned, like everyone was talking about VR and AR. We were finding use cases, and they were fantastic. And in my experience, the problem with it was well, let's talk about VR first. It's a very isolating experience. So once you put the headset on, you're kind of isolated from everyone, from the environment around you, from people. And I think as humans, we're very communal people, right? We want to interact with other people, and I think that was something that I felt put people off. The other thing was that the environments weren't as high fidelity as they are now, probably, and so that also kind of put people off. You get that kind of uncanny valley, that the kind of you start feeling dizzy and things like that when things are not just right. And then I guess the other part of it was that it's not scalable, right? So you can only put people into the virtual environments for the number of headsets that you've got. In construction projects, you're going to have hundreds, or if not thousands of people, especially in this part of the world. To get that many people through any type of VR or HR or AR training was basically impractical, right? And then you got the hygiene elements of it. Somebody putting it on and they got an eye infection or something, and someone else puts it on. And so all of these types of things, I think there was just too much friction. There was too many barriers for VR. AR, I think, is going to take off. I think what we're seeing now, since Apple released the Vision Pro, and that was massively hyped, and I think the hype's kind of blown out
a little bit.
But what's happened is that it's created innovation in this area, and so you're seeing people with the AR glasses, and those glasses, the technology is becoming better and better and better. And I think what we will start doing is seeing some of the use cases that Carl suggested, where we can overlay digital information onto the real world to help us do things and access information in a safe way. And we're actually working with a client in the UK who wants us to pipe our health and safety technology into the glasses which their workforce is using, and then augment that with applications that they've got. And so I am confident that the AR part of it, once the technology becomes cheap enough and becomes scalable and commercial, we're going to start seeing more and more use cases. There's a great startup called SiteLink, who's doing a lot of stuff in this space, where with the overlaying information and making a practical use case for AR. And so I think it's also the problem with AR and VR, and the problem that I think the Vision Pro is having, is that there's no killer app for it, right? There's nothing that says, okay, I have to have this, and I can't do what I want to do without this application. Once that happens, I think we'll start seeing AR taking off.
So yeah, wow. AR, VR, great topic to dive into, especially how it relates to health and safety. I do want to make sure I ask a couple questions though, and this one is specifically for Carl. So I know you mentioned doing some research that was commissioned on barriers to AI adoption and how it ties into health and safety. Could you share a little bit of that project and what you worked on and what you found out?
Yeah, so this was the equivalent to OSHA in the UK, is called the Health and Safety Executive. And we were commissioned as a paid program by the Health and Safety Executive to look at the barriers to AI adoption. So purposely working with a great highways organization called COLAS, we partnered with them and started to say, so a survey at the beginning to field workers to say, right, how do you feel about artificial intelligence? Have you ever used it? What do you think is it going to aid your work day? And then we looked at, training them and then embedding a solution onto a project that was being worked on, and then looking at the outcomes over a 6-week period. And lo and behold, it kind of reinforced what I believed and my team had been working with for many years now, in terms of, regardless of gender, age, background, ethnicity, even educational levels, the adoption levels were over 95% in terms of people being able to very easily adopt artificial intelligence solutions. The reason for that is when you think about in its raw sense field, what do we have? So we ask people at the point of work to pull out their phone and record the environment. And then the machine, it goes in when they record for about a minute. Based on what is said and seen, the artificial intelligence algorithms identify the hazards, map controls to it, and then actually push and feed the field worker based on those three elements I talked about: what's said, what's seen, and what's already known by the machine about the area. So therefore, you're able to kind of feed that back. So no longer the guy's having to actually, type in lots of text or tick lots of boxes. Ultimately the AI works for them. But there's a big caveat to this. So we don't replace the human, we aid them. So at that moment, this is what the health and safety executive really liked, was the fact that the individual who's going to undertake the works still owned and signed off what is produced by the artificial intelligence. And therefore, the outcome from the health and safety executive was that they agreed that artificial intelligence solutions, when applied properly, can aid in an organization being compliant with management systems of health and safety. So this was a great outcome for both AI, but again, I go back to the individual. We didn't replace the human, we aid them. They still own it. That is fundamental. But it's like now, right? If you type something into a large language model, whatever's produced by the artificial intelligence, you don't just submit that. You've got to review it. You've got to make sure it's relevant, yeah? So ultimately, even though traditional AI algorithms, we know, and this is a lot of highly regulated businesses are very rightly worried about generative AI because it's casting, and if you ask it the same question 3 times, it'll come back with 3 different answers. So ultimately, what you want is those fixed barriered algorithms, the barriered AI that says, if this, for instance, if the person says working at height, that working at height's going to come up, and that working at height will have your controls mapped to it, and your controls pushed back to the worker. So therefore, they get very confident in what is being produced by the AI algorithms. So it was a great outcome from the research perspective.
Interesting.
And even the energy regulator now has funded FYLD 1.8 million to do predictive risk and further this sort of investment into risk solutions to help organizations mitigate and eliminate harm from the business. And the great thing is once it's commissioned, and we do, this is ongoing at the minute, 1.8 million being spent on doing this as a program and a team. But the outcomes will be shared with everyone. It'll be fabulous. All customers will benefit.
For the whole industry. That's fantastic. And one of the things that I'm connecting the dots on as well is, and this has come up in conversation before, but we obviously have a huge labor shortage in construction. There's some fear about, oh no, we don't want AI to take our jobs. But when we really look at what's happening, it's not AI that's going to replace people. It's people need it to become more empowered and better with their workflows and more efficient to actually solve this labor gap that we have. So it's a companion, not a challenger. Yeah. So we did get another interesting question here. So to what degree do you see biometrics being leveraged on job sites in the future? Are there any examples of its implementation today?
Biometrics?
Yeah, so probably like eye scanning, finger scanning.
So do you want me to, shall I start with this? So many years ago, I was doing a major schools project across Scotland. I think it was back in 2003. And I remember us introducing biometric scanning, fingerprint recognition at the time on some sites, eyes recognition on other sites. And it was always about, access. So it was security driven, to be honest with you. Yep. But also the procurement guys loved it because they knew what time teams were starting on site and what times they were leaving at the end of the day. Funnily, what we found out was there was a lot of people still sat in the canteen having lengthy breaks. So we had to readjust the where the barrier was, but to enter the site and make sure the canteen was outside the barrier. So you had like a normal gate to get in, go in the canteen, and then we knew what times you were on site. That's a joke, right enough. But that was real. That was a real learning experience. But I think biometric is still used today in many, many construction sites. Yeah, facial recognition is good systems that are helping aid not only access arrangements, but also competency assessments being linked to it. So when an individual arrives on site, they know the competency because they've been through the orientation for the organization. So therefore, if an individual is accessing site, you know their competency levels as well can be built into that. The challenge comes is when they go out then onto the work site, you know, if the risk assessment is actually produced and says, hey, we've got confined space work being undertaken today, is the individual who's going to undertake it, how does the machine learn that has that individual had confined space awareness training? So this is where you've got things like APIs come in. Now, APIs are application programming interfaces. This is how systems talk to one another. So ultimately, we can integrate into things like your competency framework within your organization. So when that machine, do you remember the predictive reasoning side? What's said and what's seen by the operative, when it goes into the cloud and it actually says, right, what else do we know about this work site? It's also the individuals attacked. So therefore, you can speak and say, hey, what's the competency? Oh, working at height comes up. These two individuals haven't had work at height training. So the machine then can actually turn around and say, hey, you know, these two individuals, if they're going to work at height, they can't. They need training, is an example. So you can use this to link to your existing systems. But biometrics work, in my opinion. They are good for understanding who's on your site and who's not on your site.
And I have seen examples of like facial recognition, which you mentioned, Carl. I think it's also a matter of people and especially unions actually getting comfortable with the data and how they're managing data from their people and their teams. Might take a little bit of time to really scale up, but I think we're starting to see it. So even at the airports, they start to have like these whole like face scanning things that like, oh, it scanned my face already. I can just walk through. But as we get more and more comfortable, I think we'll start to see it scale up. And then Prakash, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
But there's two other use cases I've seen for biometrics, and they're to do with like plant and equipment. So I've seen like fingerprint to be able to operate plant and equipment, and again to Carl's point, if it goes back to a database to say if you haven't had the training, you don't have the license to operate this, it just simply won't turn on. So some of the big tool manufacturers I've seen, they're putting fingerprint readers on hand tools like drills and things like that. And again, so if you haven't had the training or the training passed, your appreciation of the risks of using this tool are outdated potentially. And this database says that you need to renew it, that you simply can't use this thing, right? It won't turn on. Similar with big plant and equipment, when the driver gets into the cab, they have to scan it to scan their fingerprint to switch it on. If they don't have the correct credentials to be able to operate that machinery, then they can't use it. So I've seen manufacturers getting involved in, and this is a potential use of biometrics. I don't know if that's the question that this person was asking, but these are the two really interesting uses. But all of this has this privacy overlay, right, which you alluded to. Like, where's your data stored? Is it secure? Who else is accessing it? What else do they know about me? Are they following me and tracking how long I'm spending in the toilet or on my lunch breaks and all of these things? So
right,
big brother thing associated with it. So there's a lot of sensitivity around it, I think.
Yeah, and I think we overcame the if you think of cameras, So there's lots of construction sites I've seen now where there's cameras installed that, you know, can even do things like identifying if somebody's not wearing the PPE. What I think the unions really like, and even the workforce really like when they use in our solution field is, I mean, when they use the video, they're behind it. And everybody's used to speaking about their, you know, everybody knows how to use a camera on their phone, right? So it's then nice and easy. You just talk about the job. But because you're behind the camera, it's quite a nice way to be able to use technology and still show the work you're going to undertake and communicate with your manager in a real-time scenario.
Yeah, so we are just about in the last 10 minutes. So if anybody has any last questions, now is a fantastic time to get those in. And we do have a follow-up question with the biometrics. And now this is getting into wearables, which I think we touched on a little bit. But what about wearables, Apple Watch, et cetera? any device that tracks health in real time. And I've seen some pushback with wearables specifically, like anything that clips onto you or can potentially track like if you fall over. And it all comes back to that data and privacy concern. I think some areas or some teams, whatever the case may be, projects are more comfortable than others. It kind of really depends at this point. Any specific thoughts?
The best example I can give people is see in the gas sector or the water sector. You're dealing with chemicals and gases that are critical, life-threatening gases if you get it wrong. And whenever we issued somebody working in wastewater, for example, a H2S, which is obviously highly toxic substance that is prevalent in areas where there's lots of sewage. Whenever we did that, people loved the fact that we were issuing them with a device that potentially would go off if something went wrong. So it's always about the way you position the critical risk and the reason why you're giving somebody a wearable technology device. That's fundamentally important. You have to bring the workforce with you, otherwise they will find a reason not to wear it, or it suddenly breaks.
Yeah.
Because you're investing a lot of money. You're investing a lot of money in these things, Erin, right? And that's the downside of wearables, in my opinion. A lot of it costs money to be able to issue everybody with a device specifically. So you've got to think carefully about the investment. But the other thing is you've got to bring them with you. The conversation, the reason and the justification needs to be explained properly. And then individuals will say, right, okay, your company does care about me. Because 99% of the time, it isn't about tracking where somebody is or what they're doing. It's about understanding we have a risk. We care about you. We're learning from our experience. We want you to wear this because it's going to help. Good organizations and smart organizations brand themselves around what is the problem we're trying to solve first, and here's the solution. Not, we're just giving you this so we can track it. Oh, no, it'll help with this solution. It'll help with sorting out this problem too.
So in the interest of time, I do want to move on to a couple more topics maybe that we can squeeze in here. So for those that maybe joined a little bit late, we're all in different geographies. So it's morning for me here. It's evening, I think, early evening for Carl and later evening for Prakash. So we are all around the globe. And we're all kind of using a similar underlying technology, artificial intelligence, in construction practices. So very curious to hear, and maybe we'll start first with Prakash. What are some of the differences that you've seen in different regions of tech adoption with AI, especially with health and safety?
So I think there's a curiosity which is prevalent everywhere. I think there's a curiosity about using AI within construction and within safety. If I tell you my experience with even just in the region, right? Everyone assumes that the Middle East is just this homogeneous region and everything's the same, but it's not, right? Even between Dubai and Abu Dhabi, which are two cities in the same country, there's kind of different attitudes. Then you go to Saudi Arabia, where a lot of construction is happening. There's a different attitude there as well. So I think within the region, if you say generalize across the region, there's definitely an appetite, not just for artificial intelligence, but for technology adoption within the construction industry. And anecdotally, I feel like that is probably more than other parts of the world, particularly the UK, where I've still got links from where I came from. And so from that perspective, I think the hunger, the attitude towards doing things differently and using technology, I genuinely feel is stronger here in the Middle East, if I'm generalizing, than I've seen or heard in other parts of the world. And if we look at AI in particular, within Saudi Arabia, where we're doing a considerable amount of our work now, there's so much. There's a general desire to put AI to work and to have practical uses of AI within the industry. There's almost a belief that they won't be able to achieve the things that they want to achieve in the timescales that they want to achieve them if technologies like AI aren't adopted, if we don't utilize the power and the promise of these types of technology. So and again, this is my own personal experience working in the kind of geographies that I've been working in and deploying our technology into.
Fantastic. Carl, anything from your perspective on your side of the pond?
I think in the last 3 years, I've really seen a shift in organizations now embracing technology in a very different way. The barriers are being dropped by the IT teams that have been really the guardians of adoption of digital technology. And really, we're starting to see even old institutions and organizations really opening their doors to embracing tech startup companies and allowing them to pilot and prove the value. And tech startup companies, I think, are fabulous in terms of, because they've been created by founders who are there, who really want to solve a problem within the industries in which they operate.
Right.
So FYLD now being adopted in the last 3 years in South America, Chile, and Mexico, through the North American states, in the US, and then into Canada, now in Australia. It's so quickly being spread out and adopted that it's phenomenal. Not just for us as an organization, we're really excited because the company continues to grow. But I think really underlying that, why do we exist in terms of prevention of harm, increased productivity, better quality through evidencing of work going undertaken. So it's fabulous to see what's happening. And I would say to any organization, don't be afraid to reach out, because it costs nothing to have the conversation and learn and understand. And most tech startup companies are willing to just show you in half an hour. They can show you, here's what we have, here's the outcomes we're getting. And you look at it through the lens of your organization and say, will that work for us? And if it does, brilliant. If it doesn't, yeah, that's fine. You just learned a bit about something.
Yeah.
But I definitely think more organizations need to reach out, not be afraid.
That's an amazing takeaway, and one I see time and time again. It comes up like from the construction perspective. Oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I can't make it a priority to just talk with a tech company. But a lot of times, many times, it's far worth it to, learn a little bit, might spark an idea, and say, hey, this could totally transform or improve something that we've been struggling with. So for my construction people out there, think twice before you say no or pass on a conversation with your tech providers, because there might be some gold there, especially when we're talking health, safety, mental health, wellness, and all the super important stuff that we do. Let's see. Prakash, any last thoughts? We're getting close to wrapping up here.
So just talking just on Carl's point, I think what we're seeing in terms of tech adoption changing in the last probably 4 years is, I think the reason for that is you're starting to have digital natives take up managerial positions and leadership positions in organizations. These are people that have grown up with technology, who are used to and comfortable with technology, and so are used to asking for it or looking for this type of technology. And so I think that this rate of change is just going to increase, right? As more and more digital natives start climbing up the echelons of power within the industry and take up leadership positions. And the other thing we're seeing is that the tech is becoming commoditized, it's becoming commercialized, it's becoming cheap, right? You look at mobile phones and their capabilities, what they can do for the relative cost of them, it becomes more accessible. And so I think this continuous kind of evolution and transformation of that we're seeing and is only going to accelerate going forward because of these factors.
Totally agree. So we are in our last minute. I feel like we could continue this discussion for probably a few more hours, but we know we don't have that kind of time. But thank you for the time that you have shared, Prakash and Carl. Tremendously appreciate some of the thoughts you were able to share here today. And then my last shout out for anybody who's still tuned in. Take a look at your CPR first aid certifications. Just an FYI, I checked mine, thought it was current. Turns out it's expired. Signed myself up in the next week or so to go get that renewed. So super important. Check your certs, make sure you're up to date. And thank you guys again for contributing a little bit to Safety Week, or Health and Safety Week, let's say, capital H. So
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, and take care. Stay safe.
Bye. See you later, Prakash.
Bye-bye.